Good morning. Welcome back to Planet Doug Behind the Scenes for Tuesday, November 1st. It's just about 7 o'clock in the morning, and as always, enjoying my first cup of coffee. This is still the Nescafe Instant Dark Roast, which I'm really enjoying. Yeah, it's a nice change from my regular Nescafe Instant. I didn't wake up this morning with a clear set of thoughts, ideas, things I'm thinking about. And when that happens, off the top of my head, the first thing I end up thinking about is technology, of course, because the first thing I have to do is set up this camera. And I'm using an Olympus OMD EM5 Mark II, which is a relatively new camera in my life, and I'm still figuring out all the systems. My first camera, my first digital camera, was actually the Olympus OMD EM5, the very first one, the first generation. So I'm a little bit familiar with Olympus, but they do tend to be a bit quirky. The menu system in particular is a bit quirky, and then you're not quite sure where things are located or how things are working. And you run into things that you have to think about. And this morning, one thing I did was use a different microphone. So I have this lavalier microphone here clipped to the collar of my shirt. I'm probably making a lot of noise with it right there. And I usually use the Rode Wireless Go, which I have hanging on a cord under my shirt. But I did want to do that this morning because at 8:30, Jamie is coming here to the hotel, and the two of us are going on a guided tour of a local mosque, the Masjid India, which is just a short distance from here. Jamie and I have been talking about mosques, and I was talking about how I often don't go inside them on a tour, to go visit them, say, as frequently as I would a Buddhist temple or a Christian church. I wouldn't go into mosques as often. And then he said the same thing. And then after we went our separate ways yesterday, he sent me a message, and he was looking into one of the local mosques here, one near the Kojoy Hotel, and said, yeah, he found out that they give guided tours at 10 o'clock in the morning, and was I interested in joining him for that? And I said, sure. So I'm going to be doing that, and I'm hoping to record some video. And to do that, I need my Rode Wireless Go microphone powered up. And if I use my Rode now, that means I'm using the battery power, and I may or may not have time to recharge it. Anyway, long story to explain why I switched from the Rode Wireless Go to this microphone. And this microphone is quite a complicated one in a way. It has an extremely long cord, which is good. It's designed for like working in a studio where you can have the camera far away, and then you can still hook yourself up to a microphone. But you got to be careful with that cord because it's attached to your valuable camera, and then it's so easy to forget that you're tethered with this wire. I'll get up to go grab something in this room and trip over the cord, or just tug on it, and the whole camera falls over because it's on top of this tall tripod. So you have to worry about that. And then this microphone, for some reason, is battery powered. Like, it can be used with a smartphone and a camera. And when it's attached to a smartphone, it uses the battery power of the smartphone. So you have to click this switch to smartphone. But when you attach it to a camera like this one, it doesn't draw power from the camera. It has to supply its own power, and then you have to click the switch to camera, which I believe turns on the little battery in here. So it gives you this big chunk thing, which is a real pain in the butt because it's big and heavy. And then you have to make sure you put it on the right setting. And then after I'm done using it, I feel like I have to remember to turn it off, like turn off battery power. When I turned on battery power to use it with the Olympus, but I feel like if I leave it on, it's going to drain the battery. So now I have to remember when I'm done, turn it off. That adds another complication to my life. And these lavalier mics, you click them to your collar, and then on a really thin t-shirt like this, they're very they're very lightweight, but they still tend to flip underneath the shirt. So you have to make sure that it's sitting outside of your shirt right here, because it will actually flip the collar over, and then the microphone ends up being like wrapped up in several layers of t-shirt as it rolls down and down. Yeah, it's a lot of things to think about. So as I'm setting up the camera, I end up thinking about these things, and I noticed that when I was copying video files from the Olympus to my computer, I was getting the same file number. I would copy a bunch of video files from yesterday, then copy a bunch of new ones, and it says, oh, that file already exists. Do you want to overwrite and replace the other one? And then I remembered that when a friend of mine was helping me out with some camera stuff the other day, he dove into my camera settings and changed a whole bunch of stuff. And I couldn't keep track of everything he changed in the settings, so I just did a full factory reset on the camera. Wiped out all the settings and put it back to the factory default. And I guess, and then I tried to remember all of my own settings and then reset everything. But I guess what I didn't realize is that the factory default says that the file numbering system resets every time. So like if you put in a new memory card, it just starts all over again from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's like the reset setting. And then you end up with all kinds of video files with the same name, the same number. And that's what happened. So I had to go into the menu this morning, figure that out, figure out where this setting is located, because Olympus has such a complex menu system. I basically have to start at the top and then just scan, like item, go down and down and down and down the list, and eventually find it, because I don't know how to do a hard target search. It's like, where is this setting? Because the menu is divided up into many different sections and different layers, and I never know where to go. So I just start at the top and just work my way down through the entire list until I finally find it. And then I found the setting and I changed it to auto. And auto just keeps the same numbering system forever. So the very first video or picture you take is number 1, the next one is number 2. And then if you own this camera for 5 years and you take, thousands and thousands of videos, then it just keeps numbering. The next one will be 5,621, 5,600, the numbering will just go on up to it reaches the limit of the numbering system. And then at least every file has a unique number. So I had to do that this morning. I set that up. And then I realized that the Rode Wireless Go sends out a really hot signal. And when I use it with the Olympus, it overpowers the Olympus, and I have to dial down the preamp on the Olympus, -6 or something like that. But then this one doesn't overpower it, so I had to set it back to normal settings again, just on and on and on, all I'm doing is setting up a camera, and I do a deep dive of 30 minutes into all this technology stuff. So that's the first thing I was thinking about. And then of course, now that I'm thinking about technology, that leads to other technology issues. And one of them is that this room, one more thing about the Olympus that I noticed the other day. I decided to do something different. I noticed in my very first video, I got this shadow behind me on the curtain, because I have a light over there and you get this shadow. And I wanted to get rid of this shadow. So what I did was I moved the camera over here so it was aiming at me on an angle, and the shadow would be out of the frame. And I thought I was being very clever when I did that. But then when I watched the video, I saw that the Olympus was going in and out of focus throughout the entire video. I had been praising this camera. I mean, it's known for having not very good autofocus for video because it uses contrast detect, the same as Panasonic cameras. And it's just not good for video. It's good for taking photos, but contrast detect is not good for video. And yet, ever since I started using this camera, I've been impressed with the autofocus. It's been really good. It locks onto my face with face tracking and generally has stayed there. So I thought, wow, it's actually better than I thought. But this last video, it kept focusing on the curtain behind me, and then it kept drifting in and out of focus. It couldn't decide whether to focus on me or the curtain. And I realized that was because Now that I'd moved the camera to the side, everything was on an angle. The curtain behind me was on an angle, different distances. And that confused the camera because this side of the curtain was far away and this side was close relative to my face, and it kept switching from the near side of the curtain to my face to the far side, and it kept switching between these three. And I think it was working so well before because I would normally have the camera set up like this and I'm flat against the curtain, so everything is the same. And I think before I was relatively close to the curtain. I sat right beside it, and because I was trying to get rid of the shadow, I pulled my chair away from the curtain, so then the camera didn't know what to focus on. There was two different focal lengths, the curtain and my face, and it kept going back and forth. So perhaps the autofocus on this camera is not as good as I thought it was, which again is why I've been considering upgrading to the Olympus OMD EM5 Mark III, the new version of this camera, because for that version they added a lot of video features. They added 4K video and they added phase detect autofocus. So in theory, the OMD EM5 Mark III is as close as you can get to a vlogging camera in terms of just having the basic set of features. There's a lot of other problems with the camera because Olympus cameras are not known for shooting video. It's not their specialty. So there's a lot of other issues that you have to deal with, but at least the big ones are taken care of. Excellent autofocus, you know, best in the industry stabilization, microphone jack, relatively small and lightweight, and flip out LCD screen. So it covers the basics anyway. So it's kind of why I'm interested in that camera. But this morning, I'm back to being flat. I'm a little bit further away from the curtain though than I was before, so maybe it's still having trouble focusing. We'll find out when I review the video. The other technology thing I've been thinking about, something I have to do, and it ties two technology issues together, is that this room only has the UK style of outlets, like this thing. This is the base for my kettle, and that's what it looks like. It's one of these big, heavy-duty things with the three prongs, and they're designed for appliances that, you know, that draw 220 voltage, because it has a grounding pin, this big, thick thing there. It's kind of a safety pin and a grounding pin at the same time. But that's the only outlet available to me in this room. But being a North American, I often end up with standard North American plugs like this one. So that's you know, basically a Canadian or American plug, the two prongs, and that's all it is, you know, two thin prongs. So a lot of my devices use this. And of course, because I'm in this part of the world, I also end up with things that have the two round pins that are also very common in this part of the world. So you end up with a variety of plugs, and what I have to have then are these things. So this is a very simple plastic adapter that you can put into the three-prong plug, and as you can see, you end up with two holes that you can put the round pins in that you get here. But it turns out that these flat pins, the two flat pins from North America, are spaced different, or they're taller than these slots. So even though the round pins will go through here, the North American ones won't. They won't fit through. They're just a little bit too tall. So in my usual life, I have to adapt everything. So what I need to do is grind out these holes to make them a little bit taller so that the North American plug can now fit into it. And I tried using my Swiss Army knife because I have you know, various tools. I have a saw, like a wood saw built into my Swiss Army knife, but nothing is working. I need another tool in order to do this. And that leads me to the next technology topic, because I've been slowly bringing over all of my cycling gear from the other hostel. From the Morrow house, I brought over my bike. I cleaned up my bike a little bit the other day. And I've been bringing over all of my camping gear and stuff like that. And when I cleaned my bike, I did some maintenance on it as well. And that meant I had to break out my cycling toolkit, or kits, I should say. So this is my travel kit. So this is my bicycle repair kit that I would have with me all the time. So these are the basic set of tools, not for like full bike maintenance, but anything you might encounter on the road, like any kind of an emergency repair. This is like the basic set of everything I need, you know, to fix a flat tire, that sort of thing, to tighten up bolts and repairs, anything like that. So that's my basic toolkit. And inside this toolkit is something that's very important to me and my life and my lifestyle. I mean, I've got, you know, for example, I've got all my Allen wrenches in here. For a bike, you need Allen wrenches. So my basic set of Allen wrenches is in there, tightening all the bolts. And I've got, you know, the patch kits. I'm sure these are all completely useless now. They're years and years old. I'm gonna have to throw them all away and buy new, you know, tube patching kits. And you need one of these tools to, you know, get the tire off the rim so that you can pull the tube out and fix the flat tire. Interestingly enough, this is a tire pressure gauge, and it's run by battery. And I just assumed after 3 years in storage in this heat, it would be totally destroyed. But it actually works. Then the battery is still good. But I want to show you something, what happened to the screen. So there's the LCD screen, sort of the digital readout. And you notice that big black circle in the middle. See how it's all sort of been damaged. And everything that I kept in my bags that had an LCD readout like this, some kind of a screen, they all did this. The screens were all damaged from 3 years in storage. On this one, I can still just about make out the numbers, but some other things I had to throw them away because the unit itself would still work, but the screen would now be unreadable because the heat and the humidity did that to the screen. Yeah, I don't know why that would happen. You know, the thing works perfectly. Well, I'm going to get a new one because this obviously is, and all the rubber and the plastic has just melted again. Everything is sticky. There's something new about material. For example, this bag that I've used as my toolkit, I have to throw this away as well because it's just basically melted. The surface of it, it's like sticky. Like every time you touch it, you end up with sticky fingers because all this, I don't know what they use. These days they embed some kind of liquidy waterproofing or protective coating on the material itself, and then heat and humidity, it just melts. It just falls apart. So all these bags that I bought them here in Kuala Lumpur. Actually, I had a whole set of these because I really like the size of them and the shape of them. They were very convenient for packing, and yet I have to throw them all away because they've all basically melted because of this material. Similar to what happens to tents, like modern tents, the thin material, they put all these coatings on it, and in the heat it just melts. But if you get an older bag, like this one, made out of, I don't know, what do you call it, like it's a scratchy sort of, there's nothing wrong with this. This bag dates from 23 years ago. This was actually my MSR outdoor kitchen originally. I got this bag when I bought, no, it's Outdoor Research. Yeah, Outdoor Research is the company. And you know, it was full of all the things for camping, cooking when you're camping. You know, spoons and forks and knives and all the things you would need for cooking over a campfire came in this little kit. And it came in this little handy bag. And I've had this bag for 23 years. I store all kinds of things in it depending on my needs. And it's in perfect condition to this day. 23 years old. It's been stored in different places in all kinds of temperatures, heats, and nothing has happened to it. It's as good a condition today. 23 years old, and it's still in perfect shape. This is my main toolkit. This is where all the big tools are. Like this is like my emergency toolkit, and this contains everything for like full maintenance of the whole bike. So all of my, industrial grease and the big tools are all in here. I'm not going to go through this bag. There's too much in there to talk about. But what I wanted to talk about is the bag itself. Because, as I've talked about in previous videos long ago, when I buy something new, like I get rid of like a backpack or a knapsack has fallen apart and I have to buy a new one, some parts of the bag are still in good condition, like the pockets. Usually the main compartment has fallen apart or the straps have ripped off, but the pockets are still in good shape. So I cut the pockets off. And this is a pocket that was built into a backpack that I owned. I can't even tell you. I'd have to think back 30, 35 years ago. How old am I now? maybe 40 years ago I had this bag. Somewhere between 40 and 35 years ago I had this knapsack. And at that time I had to throw it away because it got worn out. And then I cut off the bags. And this bag I've had ever since. Used it for various things. It's normally been my toolkit for my bike. And zipper, perfectly good condition. The material, perfectly good condition. This will last the rest of my life and on into, years and years after my life is done. And yet, this bag, which I bought in Kuala Lumpur just a couple of years ago, is garbage, and I have to throw it away. So there's a real difference. Yeah, that came from a knapsack. This one came from my old pannier bags made out of, like Cordura. Yeah, that's the material, right? Cordura, made out of Cordura. And this one as well, it's gonna last decades, last 100 years probably. Whereas one of these modern bags doesn't even last 3 years, and then it's already finished. And it's because of this waterproof coating, or whatever liquids they embed in the material. Yeah. I mean, this pannier bag, when I bought it, it also had a kind of waterproofing in the material so that the water would bead on it and run off. But, I mean, it's all gone now. The waterproofing wore out ages ago, but it doesn't leave behind any residue. It doesn't melt in the heat, which I find, really interesting. So that's a quick aside about bags and the things you put in them. I was going through my little emergency kit, also for fixing flat tires, spoke wrenches, for tightening your spokes. 2 different sizes, the red and the black. Cyclists, they know what those are. And bits and bobs. Oh, this is very, very important. This is the tool I use to remove the pedals from my bike. And so it's an Allen wrench, but I need a larger bolt or larger Allen wrench for the pedals. So I need an adapter, which goes like, this is a big one, the biggest one I have, but I needed an even bigger one for my pedals, and that clicks onto there, and that takes my pedals off. You always need that. And I got down to the very bottom. This is the thing I wanted to talk about, my Leatherman. And when I went to Myanmar on my trip without my bicycle, this is one of the things I left behind because it is inside my bicycle toolkit. And I thought it was too heavy to bring with me. So I didn't bring this with me, and I regretted it ever since. I thought for a couple of months I could make do with my Swiss Army knife. That's all I'd need. But this one, of course, has a built-in, needle nose pliers, and then a whole bunch of more heavy-duty tools built into the sides. My Leatherman. And man, did I miss this thing. I had 1,000 uses for it while I was in Myanmar and when I was in Thailand, during the pandemic. But I'm so happy because I'm finally reunited with my Leatherman. And oh man, it's the most useful thing in the world. And I'm hoping that one thing I can do with this Leatherman is bringing the subject full circle, talking about this adapter, which I have to make these holes larger. I'm pretty sure there is a tool in here that will do it for me. It has a a file, for example, and if I can get the file into that hole and then slowly, yeah, that file actually might be too thick to fit in there, but I'm pretty sure there's something in here that I'll be able to use. If nothing else, I can just use the knife and just gouge out this, because one thing about a Leatherman, wow, that knife blade is so sharp. It's a serrated blade, and it is so sharp. You have to be so careful with that thing. But yeah, reunited with my Leatherman. I'm very, very excited about that. You have no idea how many times you need one of these things until you don't have one anymore. And it's generally the needle nose pliers. Those are the most important things. I need those all the time. And I don't know if other people are like me, but I have a real history with tools where you get a special tool that just becomes key to your life, and you have it for years and years and years. And long ago, before I had a Leatherman, I was on a bike trip crossing Canada. I was cycling across Canada, and I talked about this in a different video. When you're cycling, moving slowly, you see a lot of things at the side of the road and in the ditches, things that people lost because, you know, they're riding along in their cars and they hold something out the window of their car, and then the wind catches it and whew, they lose it and it falls and they can't find it again. So you find all these things at the side of the road, and some of them can be quite useful. And one thing I found was a pair of basic red-handled needle nose pliers. Nothing special about them. You could buy them in any Canadian Tire store across Canada. Any hardware store would have them. They're not expensive either. But somehow finding that little pair of needle nose pliers was amazing. I didn't have a set of those in my toolkit at the time. So I picked them up at the side of the road. They were just lying there at the side of the highway. And I tossed them into my tool bag for my bike. And I kept those needle nose pliers for years and years and years and years. And yeah, they just became a big part of my life. And I'd still have those needle nose pliers today. I may still have them in storage back in Canada. But then when I got the Leatherman with its own needle nose pliers, this kind of replaced the older pair. But yeah, I love those needle nose pliers. And they came with me everywhere I went for a long time. Switching gears out of technology as a subject. Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I did yesterday, because I shot a video about it, and I'll be posting that video, of course. This is the behind the scenes of that video. The video is the scene, and this is behind the scenes of that video. I made plans to meet up with Jamie and another YouTuber, Bill Price, at a Starbucks at Pavilion. Bill Price, his YouTube channel is called International Big Shot. And as I talked about in the original video, he does a lot of long walks around Kuala Lumpur, likes to go exploring, shoots with a GoPro and a Rode Wireless Go microphone. So he and I have a lot of things in common, you know, similar age, similar generation, you know, so we think about a lot of the same things. So it's really interesting to meet him, and I hope to yeah, get together with him again, hopefully many times while I'm here in Kuala Lumpur. I think we can, yeah, I think we'll always have a lot of things to talk about, because we struggle with GoPros and struggle with YouTube in general, and enjoy GoPros and YouTube, and just living in Kuala Lumpur. So I enjoyed that, and then while we were there, we talked a little bit about the set of tunnels that exist around between Pavilion and KLCC, and then talked about Bill's video where he followed the series of tunnels that brought him to the Saloma Bridge that connects Kampong Bahru and the KLCC area. This bridge goes across the highway and the Klang River and connects those two neighborhoods. And while we were sitting there, Jamie suggested that he and I do that walk. Like I said, I was really interested in, because I had a vague memory of following some of these tunnels before, but I didn't remember putting them all together in the same way that these two had. And I had never seen this bridge in particular, because it was under construction when I was in Kuala Lumpur before. I think it was completed in 2020, and I wasn't in the country then, so I wasn't here for the opening of the bridge. And it's a pretty big deal, this bridge. It was a very expensive construction project, has an amazing design and an interesting history. So I was interested in seeing this bridge. And what I wanted to talk about is how I don't normally do these things. Jamie suggested we do this and go to the bridge, and it would have been an impulse trip. Like, I wasn't prepared for it. And I don't normally like to go into things unprepared. So normally if I was going to go to this bridge, walk through these tunnels, go to Kampong Baru, before I go, I'm going to do a little bit of research. I'm not going to go crazy with it because I do like to be surprised. I don't want to know everything before I go somewhere, and you can't. And even if you do all this research, you're not going to remember everything anyway. So the experience is still fresh, but I do like to have the basic facts in my head, before I go somewhere. And I know what I'm getting into, and I don't sound like a complete idiot if I start talking about it. But because of the circumstances and my mood, I thought, oh yeah, this sounds like a lot of fun. And Jamie and I set off and went on this hike through the tunnels and then went to the bridge. And Jamie was my guide for the whole thing because he had just done this walk and he was recreating the route that he followed through the underground tunnels and the above ground walkways connecting all these places together. And then we eventually got to the outside of Surya KLCC, the big shopping mall. We exited from that, came back above ground at the Petronas Towers. And that was a lot of fun because, as I said in the video, I didn't wake up in the morning thinking that, oh, today I'm going to shoot video of the Petronas Towers. Again, if I had plans to do that, I would have read up on the towers, refreshed my memory about their history and some of the technical details about the towers. But I hadn't done any of that. So, Jamie and I are walking by the towers and I'm basically shooting some video of them. And I'm saying such insightful things as, wow, they're so tall. Wow, look how tall they are. They go up into the clouds. That's pretty much all I had to say about them. But I mean, I've been to the Petronas Towers many times in my life. Then I shot video there, and back in those videos, I talked a little bit about their history and their interesting construction process and their significance, the architecture, what the architecture means. But I did not talk about any of that in this video because, as I said, I hadn't gone there even thinking about the Petronas Towers. I didn't realize we would be anywhere near them. So we're walking by them, I shot a bit of video, and then we got to the bridge. And then things got a little bit more out of control because I didn't know anything about the bridge other than what I had heard in Bill Price's video on International Big Shot and the things we had talked about while we were having coffee. So as I was editing the video yesterday, I'll be posting that video today, probably 5 o'clock today. As I was editing it, I noticed all the things that were not quite accurate about what I said and all the things that I just didn't know. So normally what I do is I read all this stuff before I go there and then I shoot the video, and I still get things wrong, and then I have to sort of insert corrections in text, on the video. But this time I went there, and then while editing I started reading up about Saloma, who was Saloma, her life story, and also about the cemetery that was there. I didn't know anything about Saloma, I didn't know anything about the bridge, and I didn't know anything about the cemetery. And those were 3 things that I ended up talking about on video. And I kind of got almost everything either wrong or not complete. So yeah, that was kind of interesting. So that's sort of the behind the scenes of that video. I wish I had known all this stuff before I went to the bridge. So what I learned, for example, is that Saloma, I was referring to her as a Malaysian singer. And I was basing that on what Bill Price said in his video, because I think he called her an actress And then he corrected himself in text and said, no, no, she's actually a singer. But I was reading up on her life and her career, and she was both. So she was a singer and an actor and a kind of a fashion icon and a trendsetter and a real big deal in the 50s. And she was a very big deal in Malaysia and Singapore. So in fact, I believe she was born in what they called the the Straits Settlement. Like Singapore and Malaysia didn't exist in their modern forms at that time. Singapore was part of the Straits Settlements when she was born, I believe. So she was born there. Technically, she was Malay, but born in Singapore. And then during her life, she moved into peninsular Malaysia for a while and then back to Singapore. And her career spanned this whole region, Singapore and Malaysia. So you would generally refer to her as a Singaporean, Malaysian singer and actress and trendsetter and fashion icon. She was much more than the Malaysian singer, which is what I think I called her in the video. And yeah, she was married, which I didn't know as well. She was married to P. Ramlee. Very interesting story there. The famous Malaysian actor P. Ramlee. And I remember talking about him at length in a previous video. And I didn't know that about her either. When I went to see the Saloma Bridge, I didn't know she was the wife of P. Ramlee. I didn't know she was an actress. I didn't know anything about her. And there's some really interesting videos of her on YouTube, not just audio, but of her on stage performing in the 50s. And it's a very interesting look back in the past, just to see the style of dress, how people dressed in those days, and just how they moved, how they danced. The whole vibe of these videos is really fascinating. An interesting window into Malaysia and Singapore, back in the 50s. And just this morning, actually, I was looking at her Wikipedia entry again, and I realized when she passed away, she was 48 years old, very young. I didn't realize that. Somehow I had it in my head that she lived a long, full life, but she died quite young. And I don't know all the details, but just scanning the Wikipedia entry, apparently her husband, P. Ramlee, passed away before she did, and she was quite stricken with grief and fell ill herself. And perhaps she had underlying conditions. They referenced jaundice, which is kind of odd. I'm not sure how jaundice came into the picture. But yeah, the grief of her husband's passing kind of influenced her own health problems, perhaps. And then she fell ill, and yeah, she passed away at the age of 48, which I didn't realize. And the cemetery that I mentioned is the Jalan Ampang Muslim Cemetery, which is right there near the Klang River and near the highway. And Saloma, which is actually her stage name, that isn't her birth name, that was her stage name, Saloma, she is buried in that cemetery. And Jamie and I went into the cemetery and walked around, and I shot some video there. I was a little bit concerned about the propriety. Was it okay to do that? Because I just don't know what the customs and the etiquette, is for a Muslim cemetery. But it seemed open to the public, and it's a very beautiful cemetery with the stone, the grave sites themselves, the landscaping. Now the Saloma Bridge, the backdrop of the Petronas Towers. I mean, even if it's not considered proper to shoot video or take photos in a Muslim cemetery, I don't know that one way or the other, but it's impossible not to. It was such a dramatic setting and such a beautiful spot, real well worth visiting. So I shot some video in the cemetery as we were walking around with the bridge in the background and the Petronas Towers in another direction. And Jamie and I were talking about how Saloma, we believe she was buried there, but it's a very large cemetery, and the grave sites generally don't have English on them, so I just assumed we would not be able to find her grave site in there. Even if we saw it, we wouldn't recognize it, because there wouldn't be English on it. But in the Wikipedia article, there is a photograph of her gravesite, and it does have her name and her date of birth and the day she, when she passed away on her gravesite, written in English. So it is there, and if you knew where it was or you did a search, you could probably find it. So all of these things about the cemetery, about Saloma, about the bridge, Kampong Baru, these places I went to, I didn't really have any of that information in my head, when I shot the video. But I have it, I figured it out later on, as I was editing the video. I didn't add, like all this information I've been talking about here, I didn't add it to the video. It would have meant, writing entire paragraphs of information. I think I may have corrected a few things, referring to her as a Singaporean Malaysian actress and singer rather than just, a Malaysian singer. She was much, much more than that. So yeah, that was my day yesterday. Yeah, enjoyed that a lot. As I said, I wouldn't normally go to a place so unprepared to talk about it, but it was still a really interesting day. I enjoyed it. I haven't run out of thoughts. I have a lot more things I could talk about, but I think I'm going to draw this morning journal session, my behind the scenes operation, to a close here. It's about 7:45 now, and Jamie is coming here to the Kojoy, as I said, at 8:30. We're going to go out and grab a cup of coffee in, I think this area where Masjid India is located. I shot a video there in the past, not at the mosque, but in that neighborhood. And if I remember right, that is considered old India, like old Little India. It may have been the original Little India. There was a community there, and it was, it was Little India, part of Kuala Lumpur. And then the main Little India kind of moved over to the Brickfields area. And this area here is also Little India, but it's the old, original Little India. And that's where the India Mosque is located, and that's where we're going to go. And I don't know for sure that there are guided tours. I'm just going on faith that Jamie got this information and it's accurate, but we'll see. We'll just go there, and if there is a guided tour that we can take part in, we'll do that. And if not, we'll have our coffee and take a look at the mosque from the outside and maybe walk around old Little India a little bit. So yeah, he's coming here in 45 minutes or so, and I'm going to get ready for the day. So that's it, shutting down. As always, I hope out there you're having a good day. I'm looking forward to today myself. Should be quite an interesting one. Interesting morning, that's for sure. And with that, I'll say goodbye, and I'll see you in the next video.